I don't want to change too much. I've had a wonderful life and wonderful success. I want to make this a great success for the American people and for the people that put me in this position.
Donald Trump has always been a controversial subject, from his political views to his philosophy and religious beliefs. But what's more interesting is what his family has to say about him, which has got people's mouths wide open in surprise because it contradicts his public figure.
Families are complicated. Donald is atomic crazy. He has put his mark on the family history, and that means a lot.
Fred Jr., who was Donald's brother, also had a whole lot to say about him that shocked the world and made the media have mouth-watering topics for discussions. So, what exactly did he say about Donald Trump? Relax as the story unfolds about him and the shocking things he did. Fred Trump Jr.'s intriguing life. Frederick Christ Trump Jr. came into the world on the 14th of October, 1938, as the firstborn son of Fred Trump, a very prominent real estate developer, and Mary Ann McLeod Trump, in the bustling city of Queens, New York City. He had his upbringing rooted in a family with interesting aspirations, and in 1956, he graduated from St. Paul's School, a well-known college preparatory academy for boys. In that same year, his father decided to honor him by donating a lot of funds to renovate the school's playing fields, which were subsequently renamed Trump Field, and it became the family's legacy. After high school, Fred Jr. enrolled at Lehigh University, where he made a rather unique choice to join Sigma Alpha Mu, a fraternity known for its Jewish membership, even though he was not Jewish himself. This decision sparked some debates, and in 2018, a psychoanalyst named Justin A. Frank suggested that Fred Jr. may have chosen this path as a way to go against his father, who allegedly held anti-Semitic views. This sentiment was echoed in 2020 when Fred Jr.'s daughter, Mary, described her grandfather as someone who was quite anti-Semitic. During his time at Lehigh, Fred Jr. took on a leadership role as the president of the fraternity, while he was pursuing a Bachelor of Arts in Business. He also completed his training in the Reserve Officers Training Corps and became a second lieutenant in the Air National Guard, which showed his amazing commitment to service. In 1958, while enjoying a vacation in the Bahamas, he met with Linda Clapp, who later became a professional flight attendant. Their romance began when she needed his help in finding an apartment near Idlewild Airport, and it didn't take time for them to fall in love. By 1961, he proposed to her, and they officially got married in early 1962 in Florida, signifying a new chapter in their lives. Linda decided to resign from her airline job, which had a policy against married flight attendants, and they made their beautiful home in Manhattan. They became happier with the arrival of their first child, Frederick Christ Trump III, in November 1962. A few years later, they relocated to one of Fred Sr.'s houses in Jamaica, Queens, where Fred Jr. took on many maintenance jobs at his father's properties to get deeply involved with the family business. His father had high hopes for him as his eldest son, expecting him to be the perfect successor to take over his real estate empire named E. Trump & Son, which later evolved to be the Trump Organization. He wanted him to be invulnerable, a strong figure capable of carrying on the family legacy. But his son had a very different disposition that was more sensitive, vulnerable, and introspective, which eventually became a contrast between the two, making them drift apart. In 1966, his father officially enlisted him as the vice president of the family business, but the working relationship with his father was becoming more difficult to comprehend because their different personalities clashed, and Fred Jr. struggled a lot to find his place within the company. That same year, shortly after the announcement, he made a bold decision to leave the family business behind and pursue his deep passion for flying. He quickly got a position with Trans World Airlines, and this only made his relationship with his father worse. His daughter, Mary L. Trump, who they welcomed to the world in 1965, later talked about the relationship between her father and grandfather, revealing how deeply her grandfather's critical nature affected her father's rather soft nature. She described how Fred Sr. dismantled him by devaluing and degrading every aspect of his personality, which painted a picture of a son constantly in the shadow of his father's harsh expectations. Since we have talked about the life of Fred Jr., we need to examine how Donald saw his relationship with his brother. What was his perspective about Fred, and how did he treat him? Let's dive into that before we look into what Fred had to say about him. The relationship between Fred and Donald. In a famous interview with the Washington Post, President Donald Trump talked about his relationship with his late brother, Fred, sharing some emotional discussions and expressing deep regret over how he handled their relationship, especially with respect to Fred's struggles with alcoholism. Fred, who was named after their father, Fred Trump Sr., tragically passed away in 1982, at just 41 years old after a very long battle with addiction. In the interview, Donald acknowledged the pressure he and their father placed on Fred to take over the family business, saying, "I do regret having put pressure on him." He recognized that their assumption that everyone would naturally want to follow in the family footsteps was a misguided one. He also stated that it was the biggest mistake, thinking that this expectation may have mainly contributed to the struggles of his brother. Throughout his public life, Donald has always used his brother's story as a way to depict the importance of addressing the opioid crisis early on. However, this interview offered a more in-depth account of Fred Jr.'s life, showing not only the complexities of their relationship, but also the impact that family dynamics can have on individual well-being and decisions. It painted a picture of a brotherly bond marked by challenges, regrets, and a shared family legacy that shaped both their lives in significant ways. Fred, who Donald affectionately called Freddie, was his oldest sibling and had dreams of soaring through the skies as a pilot. In the interview, he remembered those days, retelling how pilots from Trans World Airlines, TWA, would often visit their home to work with Fred, just because of his natural talent for flying. However, his interesting aspirations could not be fully actualized due to his struggle with alcoholism, which affected his career. After he faced difficulties with his drinking, TWA let him go and prompted both Trump and their father to push him toward the family's real estate business, and this was something that Fred was not interested in. As a member of the TWA Retired Pilots Association noted, his drinking got in the way of his flying, and they couldn't afford that. This statement explains the harsh reality that Fred faced as he was struggling with his addiction, which not only affected his career, but also affected his family relationships. Talking about his brother's challenges, Donald shared how witnessing Fred Jr.'s struggles made him strongly resent alcohol. He stated that his brother's experience also taught him valuable lessons about standing up to their father's overbearing nature. He conveyed a poignant thought, saying, "Let's say I started drinking. It's very possible I wouldn't be talking to you right now." Through all of these reflections, Donald painted a picture of a complex family dynamic, where they had their dreams stifled by addiction and the weight of expectations, leaving a lasting effect on both brothers' lives. Anna Maria Forcier, who was a neighbor of the Trump family in the Jamaica Estates neighborhood of Queens, vividly remembers the tense confrontations that often unfolded between the Trump family and their sons during the 1960s. She recalled one particularly heated exchange of words where Donald was aggressively pointing his finger at Fred's face, shouting at him. She said that these scenes were very common, and they reflect the high-pressure environment which surrounds the family and their business endeavors. In his conversation with the Post, Donald reminisced on his relationship with his brother, stating, "I actually don't know if I ever argued with Fred, other than to sort of tell him, 'Gee, "You should love this business. We can do something great here." This sentiment highlights his perspective that he was trying to encourage his brother, perhaps without fully understanding the weight of his struggles. Despite Fred's initial resistance, he eventually succumbed to the pressure from both his father and brother to join the Trump Organization. He took on a role in promoting a development project in Coney Island, where the family was attempting to turn a site into a zoo. However, as Donald's career as a real estate mogul flourished throughout the 1970s and 80s, his struggles with alcoholism didn't get any better. His health deteriorated to the point where he became unable to do anything at all. Donald recounted visiting him during these challenging times, remembering how ill he had become from years of excessive drinking. He faced serious health issues that required extended hospital stays and eventually led to surgery to remove part of his stomach. Talking about the final days with his brother, Donald describes it as a mixture of sorrow and nostalgia, remembering how good-looking his brother used to be before drinks took their toll on him. He shared, "I saw what alcohol did to him, even physically, and that had an impact on me, too." He often traveled from Manhattan to Queens to spend time with him, taking dinner and remembering the old times together. Despite the severity of his brother's condition, Trump noted that Fred Jr. actually lived a long time longer than you would expect. In an intriguing interview with the media in 1990, Donald talked about the lessons he learned from Fred's experiences, stating, "I saw people really taking advantage of Fred, and the lesson I learned was always to keep my guard 100%, whereas he didn't." He also emphasized that Fred didn't feel the need to be on guard, which he viewed as a fatal mistake in life. This perspective shaped Trump's approach to business and personal relationships, highlighting how the challenges faced by his brother ultimately influenced his own character and strategies in navigating the world. In Donald's perspective, Fred was someone who just had a lot of things to deal with, and he was sympathetic. But Fred's son had another story to tell, which contrasts what Donald had to say. Let's examine his account about the president and unfold this deep revelation. The revelation of Fred's son about Donald. Fred's son and Donald's nephew, also named Fred III, had written a book titled The Trumps and How We Got This Way, which is a revealing 352 pages book, revealing an exploration of the dysfunction and complexities within the Trump family. Along with a co-author named Ellis Hennigan, who is known for his work with Chris Christie and as a Fox News commentator, Fred III presents a very engaging narrative that draws readers into the dynamics of his family. In the book, he does not hold back on his opinions about his uncle, describing him as a jerk who is vindictive and paralyzed by the fear of losing. He reveals a recurring theme in Donald's behavior, which was the refusal to accept responsibility and always placing the blame on someone else. He writes, "In my family, which sometimes feels like the cast of a 1950s sitcom, my Uncle Donald had a role of his own. He also characterizes him as the very obnoxious one." This portrayal aligns with what many have observed about Donald's personality, marking him as a larger-than-life figure who often has a lot of controversy swirling around him. Fred also notes that many of Donald's adult traits, like his determination and quick temper, were quite obvious even during childhood. Over the years, these features have only intensified, leading to a complex and often tumultuous family dynamic. He furthermore talks about Donald's formative years, suggesting that they can be summarized by two phrases: "I want to do what I want to do," and "that's not fair." These slogans capture his perspective about life, revealing a personality that has long been driven by a strong sense of entitlement and a reluctance to accept limitations. Through this lens, Fred III offers readers a unique perspective on the man behind the public persona, rooted in the familial context that shaped him. Consider Donald's reaction when he faced defeat, either in the 2020 election against Joe Biden or during the 2016 Iowa caucus against Ted Cruz, his response is always very consistent. If he doesn't win, then the system has to be rigged. This pattern of thinking only brings about a belief in entitlement and an inability to accept failure. Fred, on the other hand, has created a very successful career as a real estate executive in New York, but notably outside the confines of the Trump Organization. Together with his wife, Lisa, he advocates for rights for disabled individuals, a cause that resonates personally for him as their son, William, lives with a lifelong neurological disability. Fred shares his experiences with poignant detail, shedding light on both the challenges and triumphs they face as a family. About Donald's upbringing, Fred writes about how he went to a military school as a teenager. There, he easily mounted the ranks among cadets, earning a reputation for being a strict enforcer. According to his notes, he was a stickler for everything, which emphasized the lack of mercy during inspections. Yet, despite this early leadership experience, Fred says it contradicts Donald's later actions, suggesting that once he was thrust into a significant leadership position, he seemed to totally forget how to lead effectively. During the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, the contrast became even worse. As the president, Donald neglected responsibility for managing the pandemic, often telling the governors that the burden of care fell squarely on their shoulders. Martin O'Malley, a former governor of Maryland, referred to this approach as a Darwinian approach to federalism. He even stated that increased testing of COVID would lead to more reported cases, something that startled many people. In the midst of this crazy turmoil, an insider from the administration confided to The Guardian, stating, "The Trump organism is simply collapsing. He's killing his own supporters." This reveals the disconnection between Donald's rhetoric and the reality of the situation. Fred III's own family history also adds a good layer to this narrative. His father, who was seen as the black sheep of the family, struggling with alcoholism and passing away too soon, contradicts Donald's later actions, suggesting that once he was thrust into a significant leadership position, he seemed to totally forget how to lead effectively. After his demise, Fred III and his sister Mary found themselves effectively cut out of their grandfather's will, a decision reportedly influenced by Donald and his surviving siblings. This rift between the families only reveals the complex dynamics at play between the Trump family, revealing how deeply the personal struggles can be combined with broader themes of legacy and power. William's condition necessitated constant care and resulted in mounting medical bills, placing considerable strain on Fred Trump III and his family. In a heartfelt acknowledgement, Trump III expresses deep gratitude to William's amazing angels, the caregivers, medical professionals, and others who have supported them throughout this journey. At this point, Donald stepped in to help to cover some of the costs which were associated with William's care. However, that support eventually reduced to its bare minimum. Fred remembers a very striking conversation. Donald took a second, as if he was thinking about the whole situation. "I don't know," he finally said, letting out a sigh. "He doesn't recognize you. Maybe you should just let him die and move down to Florida." Fred was badly hurt by what Donald did, and it showed in his reaction. "Wait, what did he just say? That my son doesn't recognize me? That I should just let him die?" He was left to deal with the gravity of Donald's words, heartbroken that his own brother would suggest such a thing. Really? This exchange only contradicts Donald's public persona as the most pro-life president in American history. The narrative also touches on the issue of race and Donald's perspective on that. A former advisor named Steve Bannon once mused about whether Trump was a racist. Michael Wolff, in his book titled Siege, also stated that Bannon hadn't heard Trump use the racial slur, but he could easily imagine him doing so. As the election drew near, Fred Trump III gave a striking account, recalling a moment that reflects on the troubling aspects of his uncle's character. In a bit of rage, he reported how the racial slur flowed from Donald's mouth effortlessly, revealing a part of him that challenges the public persona. Fred also reflects on an incident from the early 1970s when someone vandalized Donald's white Cadillac convertible, leaving 2 gashes in the roof. He was really pissed, according to Fred. He would disgustingly refer to them using the racial slur, and this recollection only paints a chilling picture of Trump's reaction, revealing his prejudice. When The Guardian reported this passage, the Trump campaign responded with a point-blank denial. A spokesperson named Stephen Chung said the account was completely fabricated and total fake news of the highest order. He also asserted that anyone who knows Donald would recognize that he would never use such language, saying that they have also debunked several similar narratives. Regardless, this denial stands in stark contrast to the perspectives of others, including Steve Bannon and Michael Wolff, who have offered insights into his character that suggest a more complex reality. Steve has even drawn comparisons between Donald's grand entrance to announce his candidacy and Triumph of the Will, which is the incredible Nazi propaganda film by Leni Riefenstahl. This comparison, which Jeremy Peters clearly articulated in Insurgency, How Republicans Lost Their Party and Got Everything They Ever Wanted, states that the symbolism of Donald's campaign launch takes darker undertones that resonate with historical echoes of division and manipulation. These revelations from Fred Trump III, with the reactions they provoke, also contribute to an ongoing dialogue about the implications of Donald Trump's behavior, especially in the context of the political landscape, power, and race. Mary Trump shared a similar skepticism towards Donald's campaign's denial of her uncle's alleged use of racist language. In her 2020 bestseller titled Too Much and Never Enough, she openly described him as clearly racist, giving her own insights into the family dynamics that shaped his worldview. Fred Trump III has also decided to distance himself from his uncle's political legacy. He has never voted for Donald, instead supporting Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden in past elections. He expressed concern about issues like abortion rights, stating, "Did I want the Supreme Court to reverse abortion rights by overturning Roe v. Wade? No." Fred's reviews also touch on more controversies surrounding Donald, such as the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, which have led to his recent legal troubles and convictions. According to his assertion, America isn't close to finishing with the Trumps, and neither, it seems, am I. This statement describes his ongoing engagement with the family's legacy and its implications for the broader political landscape, suggesting that the effects of the Trump era will continue long after the election. When Donald tried to deny whatever Fred had written, more accounts kept coming in, from family members too, and it only gives a question to ask: could this be true? Let's dive into what other relatives had to say about him. What do other relatives have to say about him? Fred is not the only person who speaks out online to say unbelievable things about Donald. Mary Trump, Donald's niece, has also been a very outspoken critic of him, stating that he has never evolved and he isn't close with anybody. When she spoke at the Hay Festival in Wales, she discussed her latest book, titled Who Could Ever Love You?, and shared insights into her strained familial relationships. She described herself as the black sheep of the family, revealing that her only close relationship is with her daughter. She also described a significant rivalry among her relatives. She referred to her grandfather, Fred Trump, Donald's father, as literally a sociopath, emphasizing the toxic dynamics within the Trump family. Mary noted that one thing her family does best is cruelty, and this statement encapsulates her critique of the behaviors and values that have shaped her uncle's approach to business and politics. Her insights provide a stark contrast to the public persona of Donald, and this only reveals deeper family issues that have influenced his actions and decisions. Mary shared that her insights into her uncle were largely shaped during her 20s when Donald hired her to ghostwrite his second book. Looking back at that experience, she stated, "I can't say we got closer, because Donald isn't close with anybody." But after spending 6 months in his office, she got further insight into his character. She talked about the dangers of his lack of personal growth, stating, "He is the only person I've ever met who's never evolved." She argues that his inability to change poses significant risks for a leader. In her words, "Never choose as your leader somebody who's incapable of evolving. That should be one of the lessons we've learned, for sure." Mary also said her uncle was one of the most provincial people I know, and that does not serve us well at all. During a reading from her book, she told a story about her father's friend named Anna Maria, who met Donald for the first time. She called him a cocky, rude teenager who was intensely jealous of his older brother. Although Anna was sympathetic towards Donald due to his lack of friends, her perception of him changed quickly. She indicated that people did not want to involve him in discussions or activities because nobody in their circle could tolerate this arrogant, self-important, humorless kid. Mary talked more about her uncle's character, stating, "Over the years, Anna Maria watched Donald devolve into an even more arrogant adult with a widening, cruel streak." She shared another troubling memory from her childhood about how Donald would throw a baseball at his young nieces and nephews without caring about the outcome. When her brother gifted her a catcher's mitt for Christmas, she discovered it was likely intended to protect her from potential injury, fearing that Donald would throw the ball at her as hard as he usually did. Mary pointed out that her mother's illness during Donald's formative years impacted his development as a child. With his primary caregiver absent, he was left under the influence and guidance of his father, who she earlier describes as a sociopath. In her words, "So you can imagine how that sort of changed the trajectory of Donald's life." As a psychologist, Mary has explored these themes in her previous books, titled Too Much and Never Enough and The Reckoning, both of which go into her uncle's influence on her family. She distanced herself from him around the time he began his first presidential term in 2017, marking a significant turning point in her relationship with the family. Donald did not keep quiet about the perceptions of him by Mary. In 2021, Donald Trump filed a $100 million lawsuit against her for providing information to the New York Times for its investigation into his finances. Mary further interpreted the lawsuit as sending a very clear message to her. She was also concerned about the implications of capitulation, saying, "But what if everybody capitulates? Then what? Well, then we lose, and that's unacceptable." Her resolve highlights her commitment to standing up against what she perceives as abuses of power, reinforcing her stance as a vocal critic of her uncle. Mary was also surprised at those who are scared of her uncle, stating, "I do not understand people who are afraid of Donald because he's so pathetic. I would be embarrassed to be afraid of him." In response to her public comments and books, Donald broke his silence, taking to Twitter to distance himself from Mary. He called her a mess and claimed Mary Trump, a seldom-seen niece who knows little about me, says untruthful things about my wonderful parents, who couldn't stand her, and me, and violated her NDA. He also wrote about the literary attention and appreciation he has received. "Many books have been written about me, some good, some bad. Both happily and sadly, there will be more to come." The Trump administration continued to firmly deny the claims made in her book, with White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany saying it is a work of opportunistic fiction. She clearly stated that Donald maintained a healthy relationship with his parents. It's a book of falsehoods, and that's about it. It's ridiculous, absurd allegations that have absolutely no bearing in truth. In an attempt to hinder the book from being released, the Trump family filed a lawsuit citing a family financial agreement from 2001 as legal grounds to prevent Mary and her publisher, Simon & Schuster, from discussing or publishing the book. However, New York state courts ruled in favor of Mary and the publisher, allowing the book to be released and saying that Mary was absolutely free to discuss and promote her work. Donald Trump also targeted his former national security advisor, John Bolton, following the release of John's tell-all book, which also alleged numerous acts of presidential misconduct. His account claimed that Donald offered favors to foreign leaders and even solicited assistance from China for his re-election efforts. Donald and his allies looked for ways to block the book, arguing that it contained a lot of sensitive national security information. But a federal judge ruled in favor of releasing the book, allowing it to hit the shelves and get people to know more about the president. In response, Trump took to X, derisively calling John a low-life dummy, a warmongering person, accusing him of violating the law, and suggesting that the reason he wrote the book was to build badly needed credibility and make a few dollars. This was not the first time he had publicly criticized John. He had previously described him as a stupid guy with no heart, which illustrates the deep rift between the two after John's departure from the administration. What do you think about what Fred and other family members had to say about Donald? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. To enjoy more exciting videos, click play on the video on your screen. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you get notified when a new video drops.